Ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome everybody to another episode of the Shadows Podcast. I'm your host, Trip Bodenheimer, and today, this is something that we've had in the works for quite a while. Our calendars finally aligned perfectly, but I'm here today with Jeffrey Knight. He is a military veteran. He has that active guard reserve time under his belt. He's also the co-founder of Angels 14. Sir, welcome to the Shadows Podcast.
Hey, appreciate it, Trip. Really appreciate it. It's awesome to be here today.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you on here. We did an episode a while back on Angels 14. We're definitely going to plan on doing one a little bit later. And when we were talking then, I was like, yeah, I definitely want to unpack your story a little bit more, and also expose our guests to Angels 14. I think Angels 14 is phenomenal. Everything that y'all are doing over there. Before we get started, just give our listeners just kind of a quick snapshot of Angels 14.
Yeah, so Angels 14 really is it started out as a grassroots movement back in 2020 with myself and Dave TeQueljo, who's a former Navy fighter pilot, and trust me, the ego of pilots is real. But so the background is we started Angels 14 for camaraderie, community, and connection. And for veterans, we started for primarily, but it's open really to anybody. But really what it comes down to is that when we leave the military service, and I left in 2015, we lose this sense of purpose. We lose the sense of camaraderie, all of those things. And, for my journey, one of mine is that, I kind of left the veteran space. I didn't abandon it, but I kind of left it and I became a bystander. And, Dave asked me to help him do something. And so Angels 14 was born. And really it's kind of a part support group, part leadership development class, is to put it in a nutshell.
Yeah. It's every Friday I know it's 11 o'clock my time. So it's 12 Eastern,
12 Eastern, every Friday, 12 Eastern. Yep.
12 Eastern, 11 Central Standard if you're hanging out here in Alabama. But it's really cool. You get on there and Zoom call, and it's nothing but veterans and active duty. That's the cool part of it too, is hopping on there and interacting with people from all these different branches and from all around. And then the support piece is what really it's not, for someone who's never attended, it's not just you log in there and you talk for a minute. I mean, we bring up some real topics, and there's tiers, there's connections that are made. I think the first time I logged in, I had made some connections on LinkedIn right off the bat, and not for professional purposes, but more personal purposes. And just seeing people come together and legit help each other out, I think that's the coolest part.
Yeah, it really is. And it's, the thing about Angels 14 is we don't have an agenda.
Yeah,
there really never was one, and I think that's what kind of differentiates us from a lot of others. Not that the others are bad; it's just we don't come to get, we come to give, and for the possibilities, because really we don't know what the hell's going to happen on a call. It could turn into that we're talking about a particular, one of our 14 leadership disciplines the whole time, and how that interacts with everybody and how that is important to leadership. It could be that somebody is in need of something or is having a rough time, and we will come in and we will focus the entire hour on that one individual.
Mm-hmm. And that's the cool part to me, is somebody just gets on there, and it's weird how it's like Dave just knows who to ask. Like, what's the best part of your week? What can we do to help? What's going on? And then that person brings up something. And like you said, the support and the outpour is just incredible from it. Talk to us about the name, because we're going to do this episode a little different. We're going to start off talking all about Angels 14. Then we're going to get in.
Love it. There's no other subject than I like to talk about. Love to talk about the Angels 14, because it has one of the things, if I can for a second, it has given me a purpose. Mm-hmm. So since I retired in 2015, I've been on the civilian journey. That many have been. I had a pretty decent transition, but then I was laid off 2 years after into my first job. And since that time, so that was the first time, and then I was laid off again. And so one of the things that's really brought to light for me is that sense of purpose. And the one thing I look forward to every Friday is Angels 14. So Angels 14, the actual name itself. So angels in pilot speak is altitude.
Mm.
Okay. So, and then the 14 denotes 14,000 feet. And so you put those together, you're at an altitude of 14,000 feet. And so Angels 14 is what a pilot would say. And that's the impetus behind that. And a lot of that is based off of Dave's story, being a Navy fighter pilot, the things that he went through. Through in the military, then getting out, being homeless, and really what it is it comes back to is airspeed momentum for any of our members.
Yeah.
And that's really what it's about. It's providing the altitude. And then 14 is one of Dave's favorite numbers. Obviously he's the author of the 14 leadership disciplines that we have, as well as it's always been one of his favorite numbers. So that's really where that name comes from. And it wasn't, and it was a lot of back and forth between Dave and I on what it was. Is it going to be something having to do with Wolfpack or all of that? And finally it came back around, and I actually, I'm not going to say I came up with it myself, but I proposed the idea and saying, hey, what's the pilot lingo? I started looking at it, and it's like angels is altitude. That's what they, instead of saying altitude, that's what they say. And then, how can we factor that into it? And kind of the theme kind of built from there.
Yeah. It's awesome name. I love the name. If you would have gone Bulldogs or Wolfpack or something, it would sound more like a basic training squadron.
Yep.
I think, but I really like what about the colors? Is there any specific reason behind the colors that y'all use?
The colors aren't, we went with, and I think it was more or less an aesthetic on the colors, but the orange and the blue, there's no real meaning behind that. But the nice thing about it is that if we want to, we can change those up.
Yeah.
To fit what, and we were thinking about that as well. But when it came down to it, originally it was a red and a blue, and it was all these different things. It was a white background. And Dave came in and said, hey, here, do this, and let's do the black background. And that one really made it pop.
Yeah.
Now the idea behind the logo itself. So the Angels 14 is there in camaraderie, community, connection. But basically what it is the triangle with the two F-14s coming out or coming up, with the 14 in the middle. So what that denotes is that is every pilot has a wingman.
Mm.
And it denotes that they're rising out of the darkness is what that denotes. And so out of the whatever darkness is below, they're both coming out, and you never leave your wingman. Obviously, and pretty appropriate with Maverick Top Gun coming out, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Although this will air after that came out, but
total off-topic moment here. Favorite Top Gun character?
Favorite Top Gun character, Iceman.
Okay, this is gonna be a great episode. I thought you were gonna keep it simple and be like Maverick or Goose, but yeah, I'm an Iceman guy.
Yeah, one of my favorites.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, he was an ass, but it's that antagonist.
I saw a documentary. My wife and I just watched it, Val, on Amazon Prime, and it was basically Val Kilmer recorded like his whole life story. And on the set of Top Gun, he intentionally created this on his own backstory of Iceman, and where he was neglected by his father, and he on set created this real rivalry with him and Tom Cruise, because he wanted people to feel it in the movie. And they did. So yeah, that was it was pretty interesting. But now getting back to the Angels 14, you mentioned the 14 leadership disciplines. Like, how'd y'all come up with that?
So the 14 leadership disciplines, actually that was all Dave. That's Dave authored those.
Yeah.
And it's something that he put together, and and it's also something that I think he teaches elsewhere as well, in a different manner, but that's, he's the author of that. I mean, full credit to him. And it's one of those things that we go through, and, we talk about joy, enthusiasm, trust. just to name a few of those. But those are really what it comes down to. I mean, when you're talking things like trust and empathy and wisdom and intuitiveness, creativity, when you're talking about those things, that a leader's job, when you come down to it, to manage things is actually pretty easy.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a manager, it's the leading piece that is really, really hard. And we call all of these values that we're talking about, we call them soft skills. And I have no freaking idea why we call them soft, because they're so hard.
Yeah.
Because you can never let up in doing those things. And so, that's really what it is. And if we approach leadership with those values, they guide us.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're going to guide us, the rest is really going to follow that.
How did Vaughn get on board with Angels 14?
Great story right there. So Vaughn, when Vaughn Leidemont, who is our Vietnamese refugee.
She's amazing.
She's absolutely amazing. Work Smart Advantage is her company.
Mm-hmm.
Shout out to them. But she, so at some point, I mean, obviously she was on your podcast. And so she gave her story of being over here and being taken care of by the Marines when she was a refugee coming out of Vietnam. But really what it came down to is it was Dave and I for a little while. And I want to say we were only, 3, 4, 5 months into it. But I met her on The Power of Our Story, which is Sarah Carell's weekly meetings for law enforcement, first responders, veterans. And I met her on there, and she said, she really said, I think I'm going to jump on there just to check it out. And this whole thing of supporting military, because she's got like 55,000 different things that she does.
Yeah.
And so I invited her on, and her original story is that she said, I'm just going to go on. I'm not going to come on camera. I'm not going to come, I'm not going to come up and speak. I'm just going to see what it's all about. And by her admission, she came on, and she said within the first couple of seconds, I turned my camera on and I turned my mic on, just because there was that feeling of belonging.
Yeah.
Almost immediately, which is exactly what we're going for. And it's not a shtick. It's not something that we're trying to make people. I mean, obviously we want people to feel that way. So we're trying in that sense of the word, but it's really not something that we're manufacturing.
Yeah.
Because we really want people to come on and feel that they can be there, be themselves, no pretense, no judgment.
Yeah, I remember my first time logging in there. I was like, I don't know how this is going to go. But I mean, you feel right at home, like right when you log in there. And I've reached out to people before, and I'm like, hey, you need to log in here and check this out. And the feedback I've got after is exactly what you said with Vaughn. It's like, yeah, there's no trepidation. You're just going to go ahead and hit unmute and start speaking up and sharing your story. It's incredible. And I mean, I know y'all have done some incredible things since y'all have started, but what is like the one thing, if you don't mind sharing, that you kind of look back at and you're like, that right there made it totally worth it. If we were to stop shop today, it was totally worth the whole experience.
Great question. And I love that question. And I'll go back and I won't use any names. Mm-hmm. But we did have a member early on, and still a member. But this individual came onto the show reluctantly, and came on was struggling, and but in several different places. But really, what it came down to, my favorite part of this, it said, okay, this we have to continue doing this, because remember in the story, Dave actually I don't know that I told the story, but it just kind of came together one afternoon in a conversation while I was looking for a job, because I was unemployed at the time. And Dave asked, hey, do you want to help do this? And I'm like, what? And he said, I don't know, but we got to do something. So we decided to do this Zoom thing. And one of the members was on there that came on very early. And we got a message from that individual the next day saying that their spouse couldn't believe the difference in them in just a 24-hour period
Wow.
of their mental outlook on life.
Yeah.
And it wasn't anything that we did in particular. I mean, we're not professional counselors. We're not trained that way. It's just, again, it comes down to that connection. And that's really what set it in stone for Dave and I, was to, hey, yep, okay, if we impacted that one life, we can impact more.
Mm-hmm.
And let's continue to do that, because even if it's just that one person, it's well worth it.
Yeah, it's that camaraderie piece.
It is. It's
Yeah.
huge. It's so understated.
Yeah.
That when they're coming out, because like me, when I came out, and by the way, I recommend everybody 2 years before you're going to get out, or that you're going to get out, start working it. start getting into LinkedIn, start networking, start doing all of those things. And you're seeing more and more of it now, because they're more educated than they were even 6-7 years ago.
Yes.
And there's so much available out there now that not even I had in 2015, that I wish I did. And it's fantastic. But you pretty much step out of it, and there goes the military. I mean, the military is no longer, yes, you have buddies still in the military, you have all those, but it's different.
It's Bill from accounting.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. The HR rep, Janine down the hall. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, no, that it's awesome. Everything that y'all are doing. If somebody listening to this is like, hey, I want to go check this out, where can you point them to?
So www.angels14.com. That's the easiest place to go. They also can look me up on LinkedIn, connect with me. I can DM them the Zoom link. We also have a YouTube channel, which we don't have a customized one right now, so we don't have enough subscribers. But hey, if you're out there, subscribe. So we can get that going as well. And obviously, Dave DeQueljo or Von Lademone, are also out there. And but yeah, they also can go on LinkedIn. We have a page there as well.
Yeah, if you are listening to this episode on Monday, well, it's just gonna be 4th of July when this episode is out. So if you're listening to it throughout the week, definitely mark your calendar, go check them out this upcoming Friday with another episode but another get together of Angels 14. So you will not regret it. Trust me. I actually get irked when my schedule is cleared and I'm good to go on there, and then something comes up and I'm not able to. And I was just telling Jeff before we got started a couple of weeks ago, I logged in, I had free time in my schedule. I was in there for like all of 10 minutes and I got pulled out by a phone call. And I was so upset about that because it was over with like at 12, which is Central Standard Time when the meeting was ending. I was like, this couldn't have waited 1 hour, but yeah, totally worth it. So now we're going to jump into your story. But we're gonna, like I said, we're doing this episode a little different today. So
I'm good.
Still got to do the 5 rounds presented by Giant Worldwide. So first question for you: what's a guilty pleasure you have?
A guilty pleasure that I have. That's a great question, dude. Oh, you are stumping me right now.
Well, that's just the first one. We got 4 more.
Oh my goodness. If it would be a guilty pleasure, would be sitting on the couch and watching a movie. And the reason for that is because obviously I've been married for 28 years. I have a child. I have a 9-year-old, but I also have a 24-year-old and a 21-year-old. Oops.
Yeah.
Same wife. But just like escaping to watch a movie.
Yeah.
Just sitting on the couch by myself is probably a guilty pleasure. It doesn't happen very often.
Yeah. Mine's probably like sports, like everybody else is kind of I feel like I shouldn't be doing it. But yeah. What do you think people undervalue today?
I think they undervalue the power of empathy.
Explain that a little bit.
So the power of empathy, actually understanding and looking at the others' perspectives, specifically as a leader, is so undervalued. We're in such a production mindset, in a go, in a bottom line, where's the profit? And, this is no different than I think throughout history, profit rules.
Mhm.
But the thing about it is that the link between profit and empathy and those types of values is so vital to a business, that yes, they'll continue to go. And and you're seeing some of that in the world out there. You're seeing some of that, the workers and going, hey, wait a minute, they're not treating me right.
Yeah.
And so empathy gets so lost in the shuffle of how powerful it can be.
It's weird you say empathy, because I like to think that I'm very empathetic with other people. I mean, even here on the podcast, well, I did this emotional intelligence course not too long ago, and you had to have people assess you. And empathy was, I had rated myself lowest on empathy, because you had to do your self-assessment, then you had to
Right.
get the report from everybody else. And others had rated me lowest in empathy. And to me, it was kind of a shock. I was like, wow, I was shocked that I had myself that low. And then I was shocked that the 5 or 6 people, whatever it was that took it, had me that low as well. But a huge eye opener. I even got with a counselor and was really unpacking it and everything. I'm like, no, I listen to people and I understand it. Like it's deeper than just that. It's deeper
It
than
is.
just hearing somebody. So it was a big eye opener for me. So next one for you. What is something you're afraid to try?
I'm afraid to try. Jumping out of a perfectly good airplane.
Really? I wouldn't have guessed that one.
I'm a leg in the Army, what they call us without airborne. But
You're not Jay
yeah,
Lee.
I am not. I'm not a heights person. And so jumping out of an airplane is one of those things that, yeah, I mean, I got invited just a couple of weeks ago and I'm like, nah, I don't think so. Well, one, besides that, how much it costs, to jump out of an airplane and pay that amount of money. It's like, no, I can probably do without.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Watch Top Gun.
Yeah, you could add that. You could add that into rock climbing too. Rock climbing, I just have no interest in doing because of heights.
See, I'm not afraid of heights. I was the person who stood on the side of the Grand Canyon and literally just looked straight down and had zero fear. I would jump
Good for you.
I would jump out of an airplane, Point Break style and everything. But for whatever reason, I will not go rock climbing because I can't wrap my head around it. Like for me, it's just, I think I've seen too many movies with too many things going wrong. Rock climbing, you don't see a lot of movies where someone jumps out of a plane and they just go splat on the ground.
Right.
So that might be why.
I'm with you. So it all has to do with that. Now, I would go skydiving before I go rock climbing.
Yes. Yeah.
So, I mean, so that's one of those things that, yeah. But yeah, I get near Grand Canyon, even with the fence there.
Yeah.
When I went there, I was at least 10 feet back from that.
Yeah, that's my wife. But I had Becton on my shoulders and I was walking over there. I was like, oh wow. And then I put her down. I walked right to the edge. I dropped a rock and everything. And I was like, wow, that's really, but now to climb up to that point, no, I will not do that. But I will stand up there on top. Next one for you. Book recommendation for our listeners.
Book recommendation. I'm gonna have to think about that one for a minute. I'm glad that you can edit some of this out.
Yeah.
The Culture Code.
It's a good book.
It's a great book. And I want to say, who's the author of that? I forget who the author of that is. Shoot, man. Daniel Coyle, I think.
Check real fast.
Yeah.
You said this is the beauty of this.
Yeah, this is the beauty, man. Daniel Coyle.
Okay.
Yeah, one of the, I read that book. I read it twice. Well, I didn't read it. I mean, I listened to it. I do a lot of that because I commute to work.
Mm-hmm.
But I listened to it in its entirety once, and then it was so good, I listened to it again. And the things that they talk about in there about a culture and how are those and empathy's in there. All of those soft skills that everybody talks about are really what impacts the team and impacts the culture and how we interact with them. So it's it was one of those books. And as a matter of fact, I've been thinking about picking it up again and reading it.
That's a sign of a good book, is when you've You've read it, you keep picking it up. I have like 6 of those that you just keep going back to. We'll
Yep.
have that one listed under our book recommendations over on our website. And then, final question for you: you could have dinner with 3 historical individuals who are no longer with us anymore. Can't be family. Who would you dine with?
So the first one would probably be Jesus Christ.
Okay, it's a good one.
Um, and I'm not, while I'm not a particularly religious person, if you will, I grew up Catholic, but that's neither here nor there. But I do have a faith.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of those things that I don't, a lot of people don't know that, but it's something for me that has always kept me grounded, and kept me going, no matter what's going on around me. And so that would be the first person, because there's just so many things. I mean, obviously, anybody out there listening to this is going to go, yeah, that's a good pick. Some people are going
It's
to
a
be
good
going,
number 1 overall pick.
yeah, good number 1 overall pick, and it's, yeah, okay, that's going to say it, but really, what it comes down to is it comes down to my faith, and my personal relationship, and that's what it is. It's a personal relationship.
Yep.
It's my spirituality, and it's not everybody's spirituality. Spirituality is where where you find that purpose.
That's what works for you.
Yep. So it works for you. And so, it's all around on that. Who else would I say that I would, man, this is like an interview.
You're doing really well. You're doing really.
What color are you? Or what, if you were a superhero, who would it be? Geez, who else would I sit down with? Man, I might have to come back to that one.
Okay. Any like athletes that come to mind, or musicians?
Athletes, that's a good one, because if you say athletes, one of them for me would be Larry Bird. Actually, I mean, you can see behind me, I'm a Celtics fan, and that's I've always been a huge fan of his. And a lot of that has to do with the workman-like style that he had, and still play basketball and still trash talk with the best of them. And so, and how he went through, his life, and how he got to where he was, and the perseverance that it takes from that. So yeah, I mean, if I'm going to pick an athlete, that's going to
still with us, but we'll go with Larry Bird.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. He was supposed to be gone, wasn't he?
We'll invite him. He's with us.
Hey, sorry, Larry. I didn't mean to, do that. So I missed the front part. So that's on me.
Somebody's going to go update his Wikipedia or something now.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Hey, that dude said that.
Yeah. What about like a, let's see, for your third person, either a military member in the past, an actor?
Yeah. So for me, I think, and many people knew him. I never did. I was, at the height of his notoriety, and in the Gulf War, I was still in college. But that's General Schwarzkopf.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Reading, I read his book many years ago, and it's really stuck with me. And a lot of it has to do, there's some things in there that I still refer to, and just learning from him, or, asking the questions, hey, what's going through your mind here and here? And, you've got all this going on, and just, grabbing that, and figuring out, because that's how we learn. If we learn from those that have made there, whether he was revered, whether he was, people didn't like him, whether they were afraid of him, there's all things there that, we all have in us that's going to happen to, but still you can learn from each one of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you don't like somebody, whether you do like somebody, you learn, what to do and what not to do.
Yeah.
And so, a lot of his is just fascinating. One of those things he was talking about, and I don't want to take this as a quote, but he was talking about his time at West Point, and he said, hey, we had somebody that was on the team that just couldn't do anything right, do nothing right. But what he did is he was in charge. I'm not sure if he was the company commander at the time, but he figured out what that person did really, really well. And he assigned that task to them. That's all they did.
Yep.
And what that did is that person actually graduated West Point too. And so hopefully I got that right. It's been a long time since I've read that book, but that's what really stuck with me.
Yeah, he's got some really good book. I mean, they came out like early 90s.
Yeah.
Right after Gulf War wrapped up. It's like 92, 93. It Doesn't Take a Hero is one of which, but yeah, good answer. Good answer there. So you have survived the 5 rounds.
I almost didn't survive.
You did good. No, you did good. You did good. So we're 2/3 of the way through this. Now we are going to unpack your story a little bit. So for our listeners out there, take them back in the DeLorean, like when you were growing up. What was Jeffrey Knight's childhood like?
So, that's funny you say DeLorean, because those were my formative years. Cause I'm old. Yeah, so my story really was, I can start to, hey, I was born in Lincoln, Nebraska. Okay. I don't think anybody wants to go that far back. But that's where my love of the Cornhuskers comes in, is because I was born in Lincoln, Nebraska. But really, I come from a broken home, a divorced family. My parents divorced when I was 5 or 6, something like that. And a single mom that was taking care of 3 children. And she was she was on welfare, putting herself through anesthesia school and working full time.
Wow.
And so, living in a trailer park, that's why I can crack some trailer park jokes every now and again. But really that's kind of where I came from. So from a young age, I saw a lot of different things, and my story's not unique in terms of, a divorced family, any of that. But where I really go back is I go back to that in the resilience, in the things that I learned from my mother, in terms of, hey, this is how you can navigate through this. Watching her faith as well, and her strength in her faith. So all of those things, fast forward, when I was, I think in 6th or 7th grade maybe, but she got remarried. And so we relocated. Couldn't have asked for a better stepfather.
That's awesome.
Than I got. And so throughout those years, I'm blessed to, have that experience, even though it was tough as a young kid. But it really set me on the trajectory. And the funny thing about it is that I had a brother that was in the military that enjoyed the military, but I had heard enough about the military that I wasn't really interested in going in. Okay. But I graduated from high school and I didn't have a way to go to college.
Where'd y'all relocate to?
We relocated from Minnesota to Rapid City, South Dakota.
Okay.
So the Black Hills area, Mount Rushmore.
Yep.
In that area. And that's where I grew up. And so, and that's where I went to high school and, came around and that's the funny thing is I didn't have any interest in the military until I didn't have a way to pay for college.
What were you thinking about doing if you could have gotten it? Let's say you had like a full ride, go to any, you can go to South Dakota State. What would you have, what path do you think you would have gone down?
It's really a good, it's a good question because really that's what I did. So I enlisted in the National Guard because I didn't want to go full time.
Yeah.
And so I figured I'd go in and I'd serve that way. And, truth be told, that's why I went in, is to get the money for school. And so it took me down the path of basic training, being enlisted first, all of those things, which was an advantage later on in my career.
Yeah.
Having gone through that in basic training, and I wasn't just a 90-day wonder, or the, just ROTC dude.
What year did you go through basic?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. I went through basic and AIT.
What year was that?
That was 1987.
Looking back, what do you remember about basic training? Because I'm willing to bet basic training in 1987 is drastically different than it is today.
Love it. Yeah. What I do. So during my cycle, and it was Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. During my cycle, there's a couple of things I remember. One is that I went from the reception station into the basic training with an eye patch on. And the one memorable thing, I got there a week earlier than everybody else. So you go to the reception station. What are you doing? You're cleaning for a week.
I was like, I don't think that's good.
No, it's not. It's not good. So you're cleaning for a week and you're cleaning everything.
Yeah.
You know, you're kind of in basic training, but you're not.
Yeah.
And, you know, you don't have the brown hats running around quite yet.
Yeah.
But I was cleaning and so I got Pine Sol across my face into my eyes, and which chemically burned my right eye. And so I had to go to the hospital there, and they had to flush it out. They had to do all those things. And then I had to wear a patch. And it's like, oh my God, are you kidding me? I have to
go a bullseye on you.
I have to go to day 0 with a patch on my eye. Are you kidding me?
That's something TIs are salivating over, is the nicknames and everything they could call you.
So we were going to, so we, after that, we, of course, obviously I got through day 0, but yeah, we had to go to CIF. We had to get our initial issue. And I had already got mine because I was there early. And so I had to sit outside while everybody else went in. And of course there's a drill out there. And it's like eye patch. Oh yeah. Oh, so you think you're special. You got here early. You got all your stuff already. You think you're special. Okay, come here. And for the next hour and a half, he smoked me, eye patch and all.
Nope.
That is the one thing that there's many other things too, but that's, you know, you'll never forget stuff like that.
Oh, the moments where I was alone doing anything, like, hey, you need to go take care of this. You're just like, oh my gosh. I remember I went up to this. We came out of Chow and I couldn't find my flight. They had already left. And I went up to someone and I was like, hey, it was a female TI. And I was like, hey, ma'am, Airman Bodenheimer reports is ordered, or trainee Bodenheimer reports is ordered, whatever. I was like, I can't find my flight. And the words she used in between, do I look like a GPS? I got the clue and I was like, all right, I'm out.
Yes. Yeah, that's hilarious because they're infamous for one-liners.
Oh, that's what I was like. Oh my gosh, I bet they gave you all kinds of nicknames with that iPad.
Oh my God, yeah, some of them I can't mention.
Yeah,
just can't because again, back then, yeah, there wasn't that. But the funny thing about it is, in basic training, that was one of the first cycles that they introduced, and I don't even know if they still have it or if they even continue with it. But the stress card.
I never heard about it when I went through, but I hear it's a thing now.
The stress card was something they were trying out at the time, saying, hey, if people are too stressed out or they're whatever, and they can hold up a card and say, hey, I need some alone time or whatever it was.
It's a thing now from what I hear.
Yeah. I never used it. But they introduced it then. And to tell you the truth, I don't even know if anybody used it then, because I don't even know if they, the drills were even completely understanding it themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the other thing that was memorable. It's kind of like, that's different.
Different times.
Different times. And that's the thing. I mean, there's a lot of things that we look back on basic training that a lot of us will go today, like going, oh my gosh, are you kidding me?
Didn't age well. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you have the things that are like, yeah, we've come a long way. And we're still able to put out that volunteer force, and we're still able to have disciplined troops.
Yeah.
So
that's very true. And you graduated from South Dakota State University, right?
I did. Yeah. So I graduated with a degree in psychology and a minor in sociology. So,
and then from there, what did you do? Did you?
So I went. So I moved out to Denver, Colorado, and I was a counselor in a girls' home for a little while, and then that was a semi-lockdown facility, and then I went on to be a halfway house counselor.
Wow.
So dealing with adult felons. Most of my time was spent in pre-residential, so the felons were assigned to the halfway house, but there wasn't a bed yet.
Yeah.
So they were allowed to live at home, but had to report in every day. And so I had a caseload of 30 to 35 felons that I dealt with.
How was that?
That was, there was a rewarding part of that, and there was a hard part of that. The hard part of that was seeing some of the serious offenses that some of these people had done.
Yeah.
And also just seeing some of the destruction of their own lives through addiction and other things that got them into that. And so it was that there was a lot of cases, the sex offender cases that were the hardest, because you had to read their case file in order to know their background, in order to provide that it wasn't counseling so much in terms of, let's work through these issues. It was counseling of, hey, are you staying on your programs? Are you, managing their day to day? And okay, did you go to AA or whatever your required court therapy is?
Yeah.
Have you done these things? Doing site checks, address checks, those types of things. And so it was really difficult, but at the same time, you learn a lot about humanity.
Yeah.
For sure.
What's the biggest thing you learned throughout that?
I think it was one of the things there that I really came away with there is that there were many, many things that I just didn't know. The way that I grew up, there were drugs, there were all those things around me, but it just wasn't something I was a part of.
Mm-hmm.
And so actually seeing people that were affected by it, and that's what a majority of these pre-residential cases came from that realm, just because they were lower risk and those types of things. But I think it was really that there's so many people out there that are hurting, that suffer because of this. Some of it due to the choices, absolutely. A lot of it to do with the choices that they've made. At the same time, there are things that, good people get in bad situations. And so again, I guess that kind of comes back to, I wouldn't have been able to name it at the time, but that comes back to that empathy.
Yeah.
Having empathy doesn't mean that you agree or condone what somebody does. It means that you're just understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I think again, we go back to that subject. And I think that's where a lot of times we misstep, is that if we feel empathetic towards somebody, if we feel anything, we automatically think that we're forgiving them, or which is important, by the way, or that we're condoning what they did or what they are doing.
Right.
But we're not doing that. It's simply understanding that's a human being.
Walking in their shoes.
Yeah. And they are where they're at. So it's up to us that are capable of doing that to meet them where they're at.
Yeah. How long were you there for? You said you were there for
a couple of years. Let me see. So yeah, maybe a couple of years, maybe a year and a half. And then that's when I decided to go active guard reserve.
And what made you decide to make that change?
I was at training at Fort McCoy, Wisconsin, for a summer annual training period. And I met one of my old ROTC instructors there.
Oh, wow.
He was there as well.
Yeah.
And Major Gout. And so we started talking. He was still a major. I was, butter bar. He said, "Hey, have you ever thought about the active guard reserve?" And I'm like, "What's that, sir?" And he said, "Well, that's your full-time Army Reserve. That's your job." And so Army Reserve units don't operate by themselves. They need people, full-timers in order to do that. And I didn't know that such a thing had existed, but he was an AGR soldier.
Yeah.
And so it was one of those things where, I was newly married in 93, and this was like 95, or actually it was 94. So I don't even know if that was there. I was there maybe a year, I think. So I applied for it, and you have to apply for it. You have to be accepted into the program. And so I decided to do that, and they accepted me, and shipped me off to Toledo, Ohio with the 983rd Engineer Battalion. And that was my first assignment.
Yeah. What are some of your memories from that first assignment?
To tell you the truth, some of it was I call it the eastern half of the country.
Yeah.
If you talk to an Ohioan, they'll get offended by that, because that we're the Midwest. But for me, it's in the Eastern time zone. So But just the difference in, coming from where I was, had been most of my life in the Great Plains or the western half of the country, it was a little bit different. Overall just a different deal. So, but really a lot of it has to do with the growth that I had there as an officer.
Yeah.
And actually having much more responsibility in that role, as a S3 plans officer is what I was. And actually having to put together plans and actually, hey, you've got a lot of responsibility because you got to do all the work that doesn't get done on a drill weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've got to pick that up and walk that through. And I, in those terms, I'd already had the platoon time, platoon leader XO time in the reserve side. This kind of gave me a little bit different flavor on the staff.
What was the biggest, what's the biggest thing you learned from your time prior to active reserve, and then during the rest of because you were in for like a total of 28 years total?
Yes.
Biggest thing you learned about yourself throughout that journey?
I'll go with before the active guard reserve time, and that was during my, it was what, 87 to 95. It was a mixture of National Guard and Army Reserves. During that time, really the biggest thing that I learned through that period is that very early on, even in AIT, we had some retreads there. Really don't want to call them retreads, but that's what they are. They're switching MOSs, right? So They get dumped in with the basic trainees, and have to go through the same training, except they just live somewhere else. But one of them had told me, and said, hey, you should think about going officer. And it was like, okay, what does that mean? And I knew what officers was, but in basic training, it's kind of like you see something shiny on a hat and you're like walking the other way.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing I learned is that I actually very, very much enjoyed the structure of the military and the black and white of the military.
Mm-hmm.
And, I don't have to think about what I'm going to get up and wear in the morning, and those types of things. And so it really spoke to me. And again, remember, this is coming from a guy that didn't want to go into the military.
Yeah.
But that's what I really found out about that. And then I found a love for leading people and being a part of a team. If there's anything throughout my military career, as well as learning what not to do as a leader and what to do as a leader.
And seeing what not to do is
correct.
There's a lot of that, and what to do.
Yes, exactly. And I would say there's more value in what not to do than what it is. It's because so many young officers go into it saying, "Yep, I got it on my chest, and now I'm in charge." Okay, what does that mean exactly, guys?
Yeah, my first OIC I ever had. She's still to this day probably the best officer, one of the best that I ever interacted with. But at the same time, there was also people during my first assignment where I'm like, oh, I never want to. They set the bar for me of how it's like, I never want to be this person. And you learn just as much from those great ones as you do those bad ones as well. I'm sure you probably got a fair share of both of those throughout your time.
Oh, I absolutely did. And I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the NCOs from my first platoon that I had. And my first tactical training or field problem with the National Guard or as a butter bar was at Fort Chaffee, Arkansas at JROTC or JRTC, not JRTC,
Mm-hmm.
JRTC. And that was when it wasn't. So JRTC is at Polk now, Fort Polk. It was at Fort Chaffee, Arkansas. That was my first field problem. So we were in there with active component units and doing doing all these things as a part of an engineer platoon and all those. And I'll never forget my NCOs during that time. They grabbed me by the back of my neck and said, "Hey, sir, this is what you need to do. You need to be out on that line. You need to be out at the foxholes, and you need to, be doing all those things that, that are required. I'm the beans and bullets guy. I'm going to make sure that everybody's got food and they've got bullets, but you've got to be out there leading. And they really walked me through that and held me accountable to it. And I'll never forget that. For one, it was a kick in the ass on that particular annual training. But two, the amount of learning that occurred and guidance by those good NCOs.
You hear that from a lot of officers who've been on here, is just the backbone is the NCOs. I mean, it's
absolutely 100%.
Yeah, it's good to hear that. It's good to hear that. And before we wrap up your military journey, you were in the military during that time when 9/11 happened. And I always like to ask people, like what was going on with you? Where were you at? Because in our generation, it's kind of our, the Kennedy assassination. It's one of those things where everybody remembers where they were. It's kind of scary now because we're starting to get students coming through the course, our course, and they're like, I was in preschool, or I don't even remember it. So it really makes you feel like you've been aging a lot, because I still remember it like it was yesterday. But where were you at when the events of 9/11 occurred?
Same. I was on my way to work at the getting off on the exit of the Boulder Turnpike, and Boulder Turnpike and Table Mesa Drive. Those are the two. That's the exit. Which Table Mesa Drive took me up to my reserve center that I was a company commander at.
Yep.
Alpha Company 244th Engineer Battalion in Boulder, Colorado, when it was still there. That's exactly where I was at when I first heard that something had hit the towers. By the next 5 minutes, by the time I got to my reserve unit, they had talked about and said, no, this is some kind of terrorist attack. And immediately, obviously, being in a reserve center in the middle of Boulder, Colorado, and all around the country, I mean, everything's shut down. It's like, yep, lock the gates, do all this. So it was, I remember it very clearly. I heard it on the hard rock station I was just listening to. They took a break from the music and said, hey, something's going on here, and here's what it is. So you're absolutely right. I distinctly remember where I was at, exactly where I was at. And then the remaining of the day was lockdown, shut them. Hey, let's make sure that we don't know what's going on. So, and we also didn't know what our orders were going to be.
What changed for y'all with the next coming weeks? Because I wasn't in the military during 9/11. I thought about joining during that time, but what was the mentality like from that point forward for the next couple of weeks and months?
The mentality was obviously, if you're talking from a military perspective, was more security. And hey, we not just anybody can come into the reserve center and talk. And oh, by the way, we don't want you to wear your uniform around town. Those types of things. So definitely there was the air of we're not quite where we're at. But there was also this sense of, obviously, like everybody else. So a lot of people like to say September 12th is, I wish we had September 12th back. Because that was at a time where the nation was completely and 100% unified. And I don't disagree. That's exactly what it was. I think all of us in the military were ready. Hey, where are they at? Let's go. And then at the same time, worried about what everybody else was. I had a young family at the time, so I was worried about the world there as well. Then again, for the next 20 years, we went through what we did. And so I think that's really what it was. And it was very surreal as well. Because mind you, I had my own reserve center, and I had, sister companies and those that were spread around the Denver area. And, and so there was a lot of things that were going on with that too, that, are we going, are we not, are we getting ready? So there's that heightened sense of readiness as well.
Yeah. I remember the heightened patriotism that there was just all around, and also a sense of uneasiness of it feels like it felt really different. You knew that everybody's lives had changed from that point forward, but those weeks thereafter were definitely different. And you finally decided to transition out of the military in 2015. What was it that made you come to terms that, all right, this is my time, I need to go ahead and retire?
You know, what's really funny is the Army wanted to send me to Fort Ord or Fort Bragg. Is there where they wanted to send me? And I did not want to go to either one of them. Not saying they're bad posts or anything. It's just Fort Ord is in the middle of the desert. Not really interested in that. Fort Bragg was just too far east for me, and really what
Over
it came
by
down
Vietnam.
to. You're right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And really what it was is it had to do with, it really came down to my family. You know, you and I were talking about it is if there's one thing I did throughout my career, it was protect my family. A lot of people will go for the sexy jobs. They'll go, you know, and we all go to where we're told to go.
Yes.
When I came around to 2015, and it was actually 2014, I made that decision. It was for my family. I did not want to move my kids again because they were both starting into, one was starting into high school, and the other one was about to. And I'm like, okay, you know what? I've had a good career. I've got 20 active years. I think it's time for the next generation to take over. And I was comfortable doing it. Just because it was like, you know, it was one of those things where, yeah, I didn't have a choice anymore as to where I was going to go, because and I could have gone and taken some of those, a few of those jobs and been competitive for full bird colonel.
Mhm.
I have no doubt, but it was like, nah, full bird colonel just isn't worth my family.
Yeah.
And I don't want to move them again. And they've tried, you know, they've traveled with me their entire lives. My wife has traveled with me for 20 years. Let's retire now. And I say let's because she did too.
Unsung heroes.
Unsung heroes, most underrated part of our military is the military spouse.
Yep. Yeah. That, and them and the children for
Yes.
bouncing from school to Becton's been going through it as well. And yeah, it is definitely, they need a huge, pat on the back for more than that, for everything they do. But what were some of the biggest, you mentioned you had some issues with, being laid off a couple of times, but you also kind of alluded to definitely plan out before you decide to separate. If you were to give some tips of advice to listeners out there who are kind of nearing that, like I'm at 13, I've got to set next 7 years ago really quick. What advice would you give to listeners?
So what I would say is, if you're at a minimum, at a minimum, when you start to look at, you need to start actively engaging in all of the programs, or really reaching out and taking a look at what you're going to want to do when you transition at the 2-year mark. So, you know, if it's 20 years that you're going to go, that's your 18-year mark. I think that's kind of, if you want to call it the standard, industry standard, if you will. But at the same time, what I really encourage people to do, especially in active duty, or any of that, is to really get involved. One, get a LinkedIn account set up, start connecting, start coming to, start getting to know, like you, Trip, and others that are doing things outside of the military.
Angels 14.
Angels
I'll
14.
say it for you. Angels 14.
Yes. All of these things. What is available now versus what there was in 2015 is light years. DoD Skill Bridge.
Yeah.
Huge opportunity. All the foundations, all of those things. Find some of those, find out where they're at. And there's many different out there, and there's a lot of different things, and really start getting involved in those. You're going to have deployments, you're going to have training, you're going to have all these things that are going to prevent you from doing it. But, if you're sitting there at the end of the day and getting ready to go to sleep, well, I don't recommend that too, because getting on a device before you go to sleep is not good for sleep. But whenever you have that break, get on the LinkedIn just to see what's going on, and really reaching out and making those connections, because that is where you're going to find your next position or your next journey. That's what I did. And I didn't do it soon enough. I did it a year out and started doing some PMP stuff and whatnot that I didn't finish. But I didn't do the connecting soon enough. However, I was able to, because I told everybody and anybody that would listen to me, friends, family, people that didn't know me, that I was getting out and I was looking for a job, which then turned into my first job. And I had that job before I actually separated.
So you had a sense of security.
Yeah, sense of security. And I actually was double dipping at one particular time because I had 120 days of leave at that time when we could build them up.
Yeah.
And so that's really that's the biggest piece that I can give anybody out there. Start connecting, start talking to people outside of the military. If you're listening to people in the military that haven't done it yet, that's not who you want to talk to. It's like your kids talking to their buddies about something that's adult.
Yeah. Tommy said that.
Yeah.
That's good advice, because I've heard so many people say, well, I'm gonna create a LinkedIn, but I'm gonna create it once I get my degree or once I start looking for a job. And it's like you got to build that up.
You have to. You have to. And I didn't, not until my second layoff did I build it up as much and be as active as I am now, or I have been for the last 2 years.
I actually have a funny LinkedIn story. One of my friends, I guess he's probably not listening to this, so I'll tell you a story. But he was starting up his LinkedIn page, and I got a request from him. I accepted it and everything. But then, you know how LinkedIn will kind of snitch on you and it'll tell you like, hey, such and such viewed your profile.
Yeah.
And I do it a lot when I'm prepping for episodes or
absolutely
like that. But it was Monday, such and such has viewed your profile. Tuesday, such and such has viewed your profile. And it was like a week worth of like every day this person was viewing my profile. So I sent them a text and I'm like, hey, can you lay off my LinkedIn page for a little bit? And they were like startled. They're like, how in the world do you know I'm on your? I was like, dude, LinkedIn is a snitch. Like, it tells on you. So if you're just trying to build up your page and you want to look at mine, I mean, cool, but just let me know. Otherwise, back off. And yeah, I thought it was,
that's funny.
He's like, oh my gosh, I've been going to other people's pages too and checking out their pages. I'm like, no, they're probably thinking you're creepy as well. So
yeah, stalking. Go
yeah.
in there and click that. Hey, they can't see you when you check their profile.
Yeah. Can you imagine if Facebook was that way?
What's that?
Can you imagine if Facebook was that way?
Oh yeah.
Whew.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. Forget it.
So you've already talked about Angels 14, but talk to us about, I saw something else that you're involved in, Warrior Rising.
Yeah, so Warrior Rising is a organization that I volunteer for. Haven't for a while, but it's the chairman is Jason Van Camp, former Green Beret, and his other business side is Mission 60, leadership development. And so Warrior Rising, really what they do is they give a hand to veterans. They don't give them a handout; they give them a hand. And basically, they have a program in which they run veterans or their family members through a entrepreneurial boot camp, so to speak. And so what they do is they help them learn business. They help them kind of guide them through. And so really it's their way of giving back to the veteran community. It's a really great organization. And so if somebody is a veteran and looking out there, and they're looking to do that, then definitely Warrior Rising, look them up, and get in touch with them. But yeah, they have mentors that they bring in, that go through and this is what it is. They'll also, tell you if the idea that you have, the one thing about it is they'll tell you if it's a good idea or not, point blank.
Yeah.
Not that they're, not that any organization or any person is the authority on that, but at the same time, they'll actually give you that honest feedback.
Yeah.
And so it's a great organization, helping a lot of veterans.
Yeah, I like that, how they assist and not just with the handout piece. Okay. And if they want to find out more about Warrior Rising, where can you point them to?
warriorrising.org.
Okay. Really easy to remember. Okay. Yeah, we'll have links for this and Angels 14 in our episode description. Final question for you. If you were to define your journey, your story into one word, what word would you use?
Blessed.
I like it.
A
I was going to
lot
say
of,
giving or unselfish.
and that would be a close one there too.
Yeah.
As I was going through it, I say blessed, and I know a lot of people don't like that word or how that's used, that I'm blessed because of this or blessed because of that. But really, when I look at it, I think of it in terms of any of the hardship that I went through, anything that I went through. And of course, at the time, I don't know these things. We don't know these things, especially when we're young. But there really isn't anything that I would change in my life.
Yeah.
Because I went through it for a reason. And it is who I am today. Now there's things that I'm working on now that I have to go back to some of that stuff, and I've got to reframe it, or I've got to deal with it. But at the same time, had I not gone through that, then I wouldn't be who I am, and I wouldn't have been, retired from the U.S. Army and, doing what I'm doing now and trying to make an impact out there.
Yeah. What final comments you got for our listeners?
Hey, for one, Trip, truly appreciate you having me on the Shadows podcast.
Oh yeah.
I really do. It's an honor. And I'm humbled every time somebody asks me to do this. By the way, it doesn't happen very often, but enough. But at the same time, really understand, anybody listening out there, that you can have an impact. Your story matters. Doesn't matter how small or how big. This is something that I'm really working through right now. But tell your story, make people understand it and know where you came from, because I guarantee you there's at least one other person out there that it is going to impact, and that could save a life.
Yeah. That is
always love and respect.
That is our goal here, is just for each episode to impact one person. And so, so many great takeaways from your episode here. I can't thank you enough. Hope all of our listeners, at the time this is airing, has a wonderful, safe, happy 4th of July. I hope you enjoy time with your family out there. And this upcoming Friday, enjoy Angels 14. Check them out. We'll have the link in the episode description. But folks, that is all the time we have this week for the Shadows Podcast.